We have Sarah Wilkinson, who's the Planning Development Manager, Russell Chick, also the Planning Development Manager, Oliver Bolter, Strategic Manager for Planning and Infrastructure, Mr. Neil Troughton, who is the Highways Representative for Island Roads. Ben Gard on my left is our Legal Advisor. We have Regan Matthews, who is the Trainee Legal Advisor, Marie Bartlett, who is our Committee Clerk, and Paul Fuller is the Cabinet Member for Planning and Enforcement. I know it's been the custom for us to go around and introduce ourselves, but for the sake of expediency, I think that's going to become clear as the debate progresses. A couple of housekeeping notices. There's no planned fire drills during this meeting, so if you hear a fire alarm, please treat it as the real emergency and evacuate. The nearest escape route is via the signposted set of stairs to your left as you leave the council chamber or public gallery. The lifts can't be used in the event of an emergency. We'd ask that you exit via the door at the back of the building, walk across the inner car park to the evacuation point, which is opposite the police station, quite close to the pub. Please don't re-enter the building until you're advised it's safe to do so by a council member of staff. Could I also ask that everybody checks that their phone is switched off or switched to mute, and that for speakers to use the microphones as they're speaking, and for those in the public gallery, you might wish to acquaint yourselves with it. It's just the button on the right and it will turn green when you're able to speak. Just to remind everyone, it's obviously very hot, so please feel free to drink. And if you need a comfort break or any water, just let me know and we can facilitate that. Members will undoubtedly be aware that they cannot leave the council chamber during the presentation or debate. Or the application, on an application, and if they leave, they won't be able to participate. And for the members in the public gallery, you're clearly here to observe, much as it's tempting to participate in the process. So the lighting system, when you're asked to speak, the green light will display like that. When you have 30 seconds left, the amber light will flash. And when the red light displays, I'll stop you from speaking. And that's obviously to ensure that all parties receive the same amount of time. So moving then to the agenda, apologies and changes in membership. We've had apologies from Councillor Jonathan Bacon, and there has been no substitute appointed to take his place. Before we proceed on, I'm going to ask Mr. Bolter to speak a little bit about why we've chosen to defer the Bembridge application. That's the second application on our agenda today. Mr. Bolter.
Thank you, Chair. So further to the confirmation I sent to members of the committee earlier this afternoon, we identified that the site notice for the application in question did not, we felt, identify that the application is contrary to the development plan and therefore may not have been advertised in accordance with the LPA standard practice. Now, I think it's a key point is that even though this would not prejudice anyone's interest in the application, the decision from myself has been not to bring this application under my name to the committee as we had anticipated. What that will mean in practice is that the application will be re-advertised at the earliest opportunity. Any comments that have already been submitted to the LPA on this application will remain valid, and following that re-advertisement of the application, I expect that the application will be brought back to Planning Committee or brought to Planning Committee at the next scheduled meeting on the 27th of July. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Bolter. So we'll proceed on then to the previous meeting minutes. Is there anyone who has any changes, addendums, etc.? Are we happy to? In which case, I'll ask for a proposer and seconder. Councillor Oliver, Councillor Brodie, thank you. All in favour of approving those minutes? Thank you, that's unanimous, I think. Splendid. Right, public question time. So are there any questions from the public gallery? Oh, I beg your pardon, sorry, declarations of interest, I beg your pardon. So any declarations, first of all? No? Oh, sorry.
As always, declaration that I am a member of the CPRE. but that doesn't prevent me from sitting and that I'm not predetermined. I should say as well, out of courtesy to the committee, that I've taken advice from the monitoring officer because this application is in my ward. And I've been advised that the convention that members of the committee do not sit for matters in relation to their ward is no longer considered enforceable, and that I may therefore address the committee as ward councillor and both sit and vote on this application, which I therefore intend to do. I should say, so I don't have to repeat it in due course, that the brief speech that I intend to make to the committee is made in my capacity as the local councillor, and it does not necessarily reflect my own personal opinion. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Spink. For those who don't know, essentially, as Councillor Spink alludes to, the protocol, and it is only just that it is a precedent as opposed to anything which is provided for by statute, is that for those who are speaking as a member for that application would not necessarily vote because it has been perceived as potentially being, if not necessarily biased, and I'm sure Councillor Spink is certainly able to direct his mind in such a way that he has not predetermined. It is a question of what might be perceived as bias. Now, clearly we are a quasi-judicial board, and therefore we do not have to, I suppose, exert ourselves with the rigours of a court of law. So I think that certainly I'm happy to proceed on that basis, as you say, Councillor Spink. Thank you. Right, public question time, unless there are any other declarations. No, splendid. So we move then to agenda item, the planning report, and this is going to be application 22/01931/FUL Tapnell Farm, and Mr. Bolter, I'll hand over to yourself. Mr. Chick. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. The speaker there. Right, so this planning application is for 32 tourism pods and associated landscaping. There we are. And the first couple of slides are just for locational purposes. So they're overhead images of the application site and its surroundings. The application site is at the point of the cursor now, quite a large field. What you can see to the north are the existing buildings of Tapnell Farm, which is a farm park, which includes a water sports area in the centre. It's got a restaurant off to the west, and then the northeastern buildings are a conglomeration of barns that have been converted for children's play areas. There's also a large bund off to the west of the site, which councillors would have seen on site, and a large building next to that, which is the entrance building to the aqua park, and I believe it also has some parking in it as well. The slide on the right-hand side, the image on the right-hand side, is just showing the site in its wider surroundings. So Tapnell Farm is at the point of the red cursor. What you can see to the south of it is the B3399, known colloquially as Middle Road. And then off to the east of the site is Broad Lane that takes you from Shalcombe through to Wellow. And then off to the west is Wilmingham Lane, which joins Freshwater through to Yarmouth. Then an overhead slide, which I think probably shows more than the ones before. That shows the application site, which is this field effectively shown by the red cursor now. And what you can see in this slide is the football golf course, which is off to the east. You can see some shooting stands there where clay pigeon shooting takes place. And then you can see the farm park there with its parking area, water park, and then the cow there, which is a restaurant cum pub, I think. And then the main access into the site is at the point of the cursor here. I'll show some photos of that in a moment, but councillors would have seen that when they drove up into the site, and the site being off to the left or the west of that site access. Just some brief photographs just to show the application site. These are stood in by the eastern boundary to the site, so close to the site access, looking off to the west and the south. You can see there in the distance the AONB downland to the south in all of these slides. The application itself is a relatively level field, but it does slope off to the west. And then showing the northern part of the application site where there's an existing building which performed a role as an ablution block before when the site was used for camping. And next to that are some existing lodges that were used for previous use on the site. And you can see in the background a large barn and the beginnings of the bund off to the east. And then just looking back across the site, stood in between Tatler Farm and the site itself, looking off to the south. Again, you can see the downs there, and you can see various hedgerows and the bund in the site. And then a photograph here taken from the access road showing the access just to the south of the application site. This won't be the access to it, and the bund which wraps around in the hedgerows next to that road. And then, as I said, here's some photographs of the site access. That access was built in accordance with the planning permission, and so it does meet apparently the highway standards, 215 metres visibility displays. And just next to it is a small lay-by area which allows traffic using that road to pass any traffic which is waiting to turn right into the application site. So the proposed development would be the 32 tourism pods. They would effectively be small containers that would measure 7.3 metres long, 2.5 metres wide and 2.6 metres high. They would be clad in timber that would be stained in earth tone colours. I'll show you some elevations of those in a moment. But this plan is showing you the layout of those tourism pods, which would be grouped together in numbers of 2s and 3s. You can see there the existing ablution block 2, just close to that kink in the red line for the application site. And then there is proposed landscaping scheme to be undertaken within the site, which is to include, I think, 1,900 square metres of planting, 70 specimen trees, and then also some hedgerow planting as well. So 196 metres of that. Then moving, this is just showing the landscaping plan in sort of black and white detail, where you can see these specimen trees, the proposed tree and hedgerow planting alongside the western side of the site, and then also a small parking area just off the eastern part of the site. And this is where we walked into the site on Friday, councillors. This would be the main access into the site. The elevations then of the tourism pods, as I said, they'll be finished in rough sawn timber. It will be stained in the 8 different colours that you can see here on the top right hand side of this slide. The proposed entrance to the site will be in the north east, so facing towards the site access, and windows would be in the western elevation, and they would be fitted with timber louver screens. In addition, the south and the western elevations will be clad in trellis, and that will allow climbing plants such as clematis to grow up alongside that wall. And then just some cross sections showing how the containers would look. So you can see the existing bund for the site, how they would look, how the site drops off to the west, proposed tree planting at 15 years, and also the hedgerow planting here on the western side of the site. And this is an elevation showing the proposed ablution block. So that was actually approved in 2017. This site would reuse that building. So you can see there the floor plan showing the toilets and changing areas, and the elevations showing the building itself. This slide shows the proposed lighting scheme for the site. So the lighting scheme has been designed to be sort of a light touch. So the interior of the buildings, containers I should say, will not be lit by standard electrical lighting. It will rely on battery operated lighting and torches to be a sort of a tent-like experience, if you like. And outside of that, there will be low-level bollards similar to those shown here. Basically, this is a fencing post with a directional light. You can see the hood there, which directs the lighting downwards, And this plan is showing how that light spillage would take place. That lighting would be timed to be switched off at 10 o'clock. But obviously, if anyone does need to get up in the night and run over to the ablution block, that lighting will turn on with sensors if someone is moving about. It is important, I think, just to show the previous permissions for this site. In 2017, Planning Authority approved this tent layout for the site, which was permitted to be used between May and September. After that, the tents would be taken down. So the top right-hand image is just showing what those tents would look like. It says 4 to 6 meters high bale tent. That's actually not quite right. They would be, I'm just going to check my notes, they would actually be 3.5 meters tall. The 4 to 6 meters bit was actually the actual width of the tents, not the height. So I noticed that this morning and obviously didn't notice to change that bit, but they wouldn't have been 4 to 6 meters high. This is showing the layout, and obviously the larger circles are showing the larger tents that were 6 meters wide, and the smaller ones are the tents that were round about 4 meters wide. There was also permission for this communal activities tent, which would be located slightly off to the south of that ablution block. And then just showing an application that was approved in 2015. This was a high ropes course. So our application site is here where it said there used to be a pond, and this high ropes course was approved and implemented and undertaken for some time for 10-meter high ropes course, and also an activity called zorbing, where people get put into a ball and have to ride along this berm as a sort of activity. And the application is recommended for conditional permission. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chick. We move then to the public speaking element of today's proceedings. So I believe Mr. Long, if you'd like to begin whenever you're ready.
Chairman. Just as a preamble, I thought just to summarise, you've all probably been with your grandchildren or children to Tatnall Farm, and just as a preamble, when they first started the business, they started from a fairly intensive dairy unit, and realising the problems with farming, they quickly diversified over the last 10 or so years into becoming one of the leading destinations on the island for tourism and leisure. What do? I think we'll probably all agree that they champion the Isle of Wight really successfully well. They champion the environment and landscape. They champion renewable energy production. They champion jobs. You know, at the moment they support all year round 100 jobs. In the summer they support over 150 jobs. They champion the economy in general in the circular economy. And so in short, they know what they're doing. They're repeat tourism winners that you'll probably see in the media year on year, because the tourism industry realises what they do. And indeed, it's quite strange to see support from organisations in your committee paper from Whitelink, Southern Vectus, randomly, Whitelink. You know, that's great to see that people are getting behind Tatnall Farm because they realise the importance that they bring to the circular economy. The specific product that we're talking about today, although not exclusive, has been working in partnership with a company called Camp Libertas. And their core ethos, again, with Tatnall Farm, is to encourage young children between the years of 8 and 15, all across the country, to invite them down to the Isle of Wight to immerse themselves in the environment. And so you need a product that is suited to the environment. And it's about creating creative, immersive experiences where they learn from their peers, and then importantly, after the programme, they learn about themselves, which is all important nowadays about health and well-being. Why has that happened? Historically, where children's accommodation has suffered, unfortunately, in our economy, we have a lot of dying hotels which aren't of suitable quality for pretty much anyone to stay in, let alone our children. On the other side, we've got people working really hard, where the hotels are too expensive, but they're surviving just. The others don't take school groups because that's against their philosophy and they don't want to affect our guests. And the others are suffering because the hotels aren't in the right location for that immersive experience. So once you get those ley lines all correct, that's why Camp Libertas and Tatnall Farm want to work together, because they create the right blend of tourism accommodation and location to create this completely immersive experience. So essentially, the project does seek to promote the best of the Isle of Wight and achieving a circular economy that not only would create 10 additional jobs over the 150 that I just quoted, but also has widespread sporting, environmental and educational goals that has a wider effect on the economy. Similar projects nationwide have seen that the children have been great advocates to then immerse the parents to come back to the destination which they have. They're great advertisers. And so not only will the children come here, but we're, by knock on default, we're encouraging them to come and experience what their children have by the quality of the experience. So the site itself, as Mr. Chick outlined, has got consent and enacted for a high ropes course up to 10 metres, an absorbing course, and also 30 bell tents with a communal tent. Those consents would go. Essentially, the project in its own right replaces that with 32 pods and quite an immersive landscape experience, including, as Mr. Chick said, 1,900 square metres of tree and scrub plantings, 70 specimen trees, 195 metres of mixed hedgerow, and then 21,300 square metres of meadow grassland. So it creates quite a beautiful framework for these pods to sit within. And again, it lines back to the immersive experience that the children would be within. And importantly, the landscaping itself isn't there for mitigation. I'll come on to mitigation in terms of the design by the landscape architect in a second, but the landscaping within the 21,300 square metres of the kind of field is essentially there as a landscape game. It's a positive thing to do to create that immersive experience, but they're not, the landscaping there itself isn't there to screen pods and to disguise things. It's there as a positive attribute. So the pods themselves and the layout has all been designed by a landscape architect. The applicants have been firm that it should be a landscape-led approach, and therefore once you're balancing the difference of the high ropes course and the bell tents, the landscape architect was charged to give a great experience with tight clusters, low-level planting, strict analysis of colour charts and materiality to give a really positive feeling to the site and to essentially encourage growth but do it exceptionally well. And that's the catalyst for a positive product for the site. The results, a project which reduces the footprints of the tents and the high ropes course, completely landscape immersive, doesn't break the horizon when you're looking from Afton, which one you'll probably have noted a refusal historically. Part of that was because the domes were quite big structures and they broke horizon. That was quite a catalyst to bring things down below horizon, so the main landform was the most dominant form on that horizon. Combined with the colour charts and landscaping, again, you're creating this immersive experience. The pods themselves are highly insulated and they require no foundations. They're just a light touch on the ground. I'll leave it there, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Long. We'll then proceed to Councillor Spink, speaking as the local member. Councillor Spink.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Planning Committee. I hope I won't be very long, and I'm timed anyway to, I think it is 6 minutes. But I'd just like to say that, as Mr. Long has said, Tapnell Farm is a thriving and successful business. And most of the people that I've spoken to in my ward both support and appreciate the contribution that Tapnell has made to the rural economy, to tourism, and to the West Wight. People that I have spoken to, their views have been mixed about this further development. One concern is that although a business is successful and thriving, it's still subject to the principle of not overdeveloping the site. And one has to consider now what there is already on this site. There is a large cafe and restaurant which has been extended on at least one occasion. There's a reception office and associated parking. There's an aqua park. There's a recreation lake. There's football, golf. There are a number of holiday lodges. I'm not certain as to the total amount of overnight accommodation because I had trouble calculating that. But there are there is already overnight accommodation in the form, as I understand it, of something called Tom's Eco Lodges. There are 7 domes which were originally located on this site and then moved because they were put there without planning permission, and planning permission was refused. There are 6 wigwams, there's a fun farm, there's a target shooting range, there are 6, a target shooting range with 6 sunken shoot stands, there's a reception building, which as I understand it is separate for the shooting range, there's a store and parking separate for that, there's an ice cream kiosk, there's a shop, there's an indoor play zone, there's a museum, there's seasonal bell tents, and there's the high wire or high rope absorbing centre. So quite a lot has gone on there, and whether or not it's really necessary or desirable, and whether or not it constitutes overdevelopment to put another 32 pods is a matter that Planning Committee will determine this afternoon, no doubt. And I would ask on behalf of the residents who have expressed concern that Planning Committee looks at that quite carefully. With regard to the new pods, if I call them that, or containers, whatever the correct word is, many residents find it hard to understand why relatively recently bell tents were granted permission, and it was said that they should be seasonal, so from May to September inclusive. And the opinion on the decision notice is that was necessary in the interest of the visual amenity of the site, the surrounding area, and the AONB, and to comply with DM2. So nothing's changed, but these pods will not be seasonal. And one wonders why now that doesn't matter. The 5 domes, which were placed there, as I say, without planning consent, that was refused on the basis they would be visually prominent and incongruous development, which would conflict with the intention of the LPA to protect the natural beauty of the area, contrary to a whole host of the core provisions, SP5, DM2, 12, 13, 15, and the MPPF. And as I say, residents are struggling to understand how the LPA is recommending, or some residents are struggling to understand how the LPA is recommending approval for 32 pods in the same area. And again, I'd ask Planning Committee to look at that quite carefully. Residents, and I accept that this isn't strictly speaking a material planning consideration, but residents are concerned about the way in which in the past the applicant has been slightly, shall I say, cavalier with the planning regulations, and whether or not, therefore, conditions imposed which are important will be complied with. For example, as I've said, the 5 domes were placed on the site that they now seek permission for 32 without planning permission, and the application for them to be retained refused. Those of the committee who went on the site visit will have seen that some of the pods, I didn't count them, I think 4 or 5 or thereabouts, have now already been constructed on this site without planning permission. And I happened to pop back to Tapnell the other day after the site visit on a separate day. And those pods, although they were unoccupied at the time of our site visit, had people staying in them. So it was already operating contrary to the planning regulations in that there is no permission. And people are concerned about that. And I think if Planning Committee does grant permission, it should be subject to very firm reassurances from the LPA that conditions in this case will be strictly enforced. Now, I have a matter to raise about nitrate calculations, but I propose to do that, if I may, at a reasonably early stage of the meeting rather than as part of the speech, because it hasn't been raised with me to me by residents. It's simply my observation on reading the papers. So thank you. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Councillor Spink. That concludes the public speaking aspects of this application. So we'll move now to the debate, but I'm keen to try to keep the questions and the actual debate separate, I think for the sake of clarity. So first of all, are there any questions? Anything that can be elucidated? Councillor Oliver.
Thank you, Chair. Is it working? It is working. Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify how many weeks occupancy they intend to be at. I know we could potentially say 52, but the chances are that's not going to happen. So is there a limited amount of occupancy they're looking for? School sites aren't going to come down over winter period. You can't see. Also just clarity, in as much as are the existing permissions for the bell tents and existing tents, that is now going to be superseded by this application, so they cannot then recourse to the tents which had planned permission previously on the site.
Mr. Chick.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, so in terms of all year round occupancy, that is what the applicants applied for. The design and access statement does recognise that obviously when the schools aren't there, they need to market the pods to anyone basically who would like to stay there. So that there's no figures saying what the occupancy will be, but I think what we can understand is that it will follow the normal seasonal trends where you have the high point over half-term periods and over the holidays, so particularly the school holidays and the October half-term, which has become very popular on the island. So you'll have those peaks and troughs, but ultimately we don't have any statistics showing what they'll be. In terms of the previous consents, a new planning permission never overrides an older consent. So previous consent, if it has been implemented, will, for want of a better expression, live forever, unless it is revoked. But there's no proposal to revoke the consents. They were seen as acceptable in the past, and I think at the moment that officers would not see a reason to revoke them at this stage.
Thank you, Mr. Chick. Supplemental.
Supplementary, Chair. With the previous application, then is there any chance that these pods and the tents could be put side by side to increase the amount of camping which is likely to be there?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, a fair question. So I'm just going to zoom through to the permission for these tents. You can see, which you should be able to see as well. Yeah, the permission shows the ablution block here, and those tents located quite close to it. And then if we go back to the layout plan for the actual permission, for the actual proposal in front of us now, those pods would effectively go right through the middle of the area where those tents are shown to be located. I mean, I suppose if anyone wanted to put in a particularly dense tented scheme, they could go in between some of these containers, but probably not something that the applicant would want to do.
Thank you, Mr. Chick. Councillor Quirk.
In response to that, would it not be possible to put a legal agreement on that withdrew the previous permission if this one was granted?
Thank you, Councillor Quirk. So yes, I mean, there is a proposal for a legal agreement anyway. The landscape management plan for the remainder of the site needs to be secured by a legal agreement because it relates to the nitrates issue. So yes, if the Chamber is so minded, the legal agreement could have some form of clause which officers would need to draw up to sort of prevent those tents and other elements from being implemented while this application was being used.
Ms Cox, then Councillor Spink. Ms Cox, please.
I just seek clarity. It says DM design quality new development. The council will support proposals of high quality and inclusive design. Can you please explain what inclusive design covers?
Yes, so I mean, it's a difficult phrase, isn't it? But I think the intention is that design is, when one designs something in any particular area, is looking at the local vernacular, it's looking at the local landscape and its surroundings. So that design should be inclusive of what actually surrounds it. So it, you know, generally when we're giving advice to developers, it's to, you know, if you're looking at building a house or any other building or whatever, you are looking to replicate or take, you know, the key sort of attributes of that local area when you're looking at developing your scheme.
Does that answer your question, Ms Cox?
Well, yes, kind of, but I was more interested in the disability facilities that seem to be lacking within the site and the whole design. I wondered whether or not there was some, given the legislation surrounding access for disabled people, there was some minimum requirement that applicants make so that actually these can be enjoyed by not only just able-bodied people and children, but children with disabilities, and that seems to be almost non-existent.
Please.
Yes, thank you for that. I think that the way to look at it is planning permission is only one of the building blocks of a development. So there are separate bits of legislation that the developer has to go away and comply with. There will be legislation that they'll need to comply with in terms of disability, but it's not for the planning committee to direct that. It is separate legislation and it will be enforced by whatever government department enforces it.
Thank you, Mr Chick. Councillor Spink, then Councillor Church. Councillor Spink.
Thank you, Chair. My question relates to the nitrates. And if I've understood it correctly, all developments that have an increase in overnight accommodation have to be nitrate neutral as far as the Solent and the special SPAs and other protected sites within the Solent is concerned. Now, I think that's if you could just confirm that's right.
Yes, that's right.
Thank you. Now, the way in which, and I say this with some trepidation because the maths has never been my strong point, but the way in which, and I'm looking at page 28, paragraph 7.30, the way in which the nitrates have been calculated is on a occupancy basis, but it's only been calculated, if I've understood it correctly, as the occupancy for one night, whereas the occupancy in terms of nitrates to the Solent and the increased nitrates are on an annual basis. So if I've understood it correctly, the Bell tents have a total occupancy of 160 persons per night. And but they are seasonal. And if you multiply that by 153, which I make to be the 6 months that they're, 5 months, sorry, that they can be occupied for, that comes out at 24,480 overnight accommodation. Now the pods have an overnight occupancy of only 128. But they are capable of being occupied for 365 days of the year. If you multiply that, that comes out at 46,720. So this will be nitrate positive and not nitrate neutral, will it not?
Mr Chin.
Well, we'd rely on the advice of Natural England. Their advice is that based on their calculations, the development of the, let me get the numbers right, of the campsite would result in 44.8 kilogram tons per year of nitrogen load to Solent International sites. And they concluded that the proposed development would result in 30.24 kilogram tons per year of nitrates to Solent International sites. So their view is it does result in a net reduction.
Supplementary, because Natural England's view is based on the calculations that the LPA have carried out. Perhaps you'd confirm if my calculations are correct, because whether Natural England or not has made a mistake is irrelevant. If my calculations are correct, it will result in an annual nitrate increase. Are my calculations correct?
Thank you, Councillor. I think that's a question of being highly technical in nature. Do you feel able to answer it, Mr. Chick, or would you like some time to? I think my view would be that we have a decision to make about the weight of Natural England's report. I take your point, Councillor Spink, that if the underlying assumptions upon which that is predicated are wrong, there is an issue there. But
it's set out in the habitats regulation. It's set out in the statement in support, and the calculation is as I have said. Now, my understanding of the law is that we are not bound by Natural England's view. It would be bizarre that if a mistake has been made, we have to grant planning consent. Now, it seems to me that a mistake has been made, and it should be within the power of the local planning authority to resolve whether or not a mistake has been made. It's quite a simple calculation, even though I failed my O-level maths. It's actually based simply on the way in which the LPA has calculated it is simply based on one night's occupancy. And I think we'll find that the planning officers will agree that. That multiplied then to make it annual comes out with the result that I have said. And I would seek a short adjournment if the LPA doesn't agree for that question to be answered. And I don't agree, with great respect, Chair, that we should move on to considering Natural England. Natural England's capable of making mistakes as well, and we don't need to compound it.
Thank you, Mr. Councillor Spink. We're going to take a short deferment whilst we decide on the best way forwards with a view to what you've said, and we'll come back to you shortly. Just remind members that they need to stay within the room during the debate. Oh, is it? Okay, no, it's fine. Okay, well, I was just suggesting that this was a quick deferral as opposed to a formal adjournment, but if it progresses longer, we'll. Thank you, Councillor Brodie. Right, I'll call the committee to order, and Mr. Bolter is going to speak to your question, Councillor Spink. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Spink. So I think the first point from my perspective is obviously that the figures have been provided by the applicant. They've been received by the LPA and then by extension by Natural England in good faith. And Natural England have based their assessment on those. I note, Councillor Spink, your honest admission regarding O-level mathematics, and I will also put myself firmly in that camp, having failed dismally statistics as part of my planning degree. So I think it's probably fair to say that no one in this room is qualified either as a mathematician or as a nitrate specialist to investigate that calculation here and now. So in light of that, I would suggest that the committee has two choices in front of it this evening. Councillors may wish to proceed on the basis that this evening they currently accept Natural England's assessment and arrive at a conclusion this evening. If then after that resolution, depending on what the resolution is, we officers find that the calculation is flawed, then of course what we would do is we would bring that issue back to committee. No decision would be issued if it was found that it was determined on flawed information. Alternatively, councillors may wish to adjourn this item this evening and for officers to take this away to investigate with both the applicant and Natural England and bring back to committee at the next meeting a definitive position on this issue. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Bolter. Mr. Guard, you would like to speak.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, just a point of clarity further to my colleague's statement, and that is that if you are minded to proceed tonight to make a decision on this application, you must do so on the basis of the information that's been provided to you. And so you place reliance on those figures as provided by Natural England, unless you state otherwise in your reasoning, however that may come about on the debate or through a proposal, and that you make your decision on that basis. And then, as the planning authority have confirmed, if it turns out that that's wrong, it will come back to you if you are minded to continue, with clarity around that point and what that may then means in terms of their recommendation to you. But if you feel that you need the clarification on that point this evening in order to make a proper assessment, then you can defer the item to seek clarification on that point. And unless I can be of any further assistance, Chairman, that's mine.
Thank you, Mr. Guard. Councillor Jones-Evans.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the clarification, and thank you for the question, Councillor Spink. Regarding what you just said, I'd be happy if we proceeded with the Natural England figures in front of us. So I don't feel I'm qualified to question them at all, but I'm completely satisfied that officers will go and check them, and if they are found to be different, flawed, whatever, then it will come back to committee. I think that's a sensible way forward. I think we're getting very dangerous water if we actually start picking apart all of the statutory consultees data, which is obviously highly sophisticated and quite beyond my means, my mental means at this minute. So yes, I'm happy to propose that. If you're looking for a proposal, Chair, I'm happy to be proposed as option one, if you like.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. I think the default position is that we will continue unless, of course, there is a motion to adjourn that's put forwards. But I will hear from colleagues first, perhaps. So I have Councillor Price, Councillor Andre, then Councillor Spink. Councillor Price.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I tend to agree with Councillor Jones-Evans on this, really, because we do have a report from one of the statutory consultees. And while I think Councillor Spink is right to query it, because if there is an issue that turns out to be there, then that does change quite a few things. But I think my view would be that it is pretty unlikely that Natural England have based it on effectively one day's full capacity use. I don't think for 1 minute that they would have misunderstood and got that wrong, but I'm happy to eat my hat if necessary. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Andre.
Thank you, Chair. I'm minded that the recommendation before us is conditional permission subject to the completion of a legal agreement securing a land management plan for nitrate neutrality. So I would agree with colleagues that as part of that land management plan, that we use the figures before us. But I would have thought that in the drawing up of that agreement, perhaps those figures may be tested. So that's a question I have. So would that land management plan that is mentioned in the recommendation use the figures before us without any further investigation? Or would they be tested as part of the drawing up of that land management plan?
Mr. Chick.
Sorry, I didn't hear the question. Sorry.
No, I'm going to have to remember that.
Andre, if you could, if you don't mind. Oh, Ms. Wilkinson, certainly.
Thank you, Chairman. I think I might be able to help in that I think in terms of if we draw members' attentions to paragraph 7.30 and 7.31 of the report, which I think cover this issue slightly, but what I'll also do, if it helps, is just highlight an element from the Habitat Regulations assessment itself that went to Natural England, that this is what they've commented on in essence by accepting it. And what that does is go through the fact that actually it's a lesser number of guests associated with one use to the other. So they've considered the number of guests that can occupy a bell tent comparatively to a pod, and they've looked at the per person capacity opposed to kind of anything else, and then have taken that. But then it goes on to say what is outlined within, I think, 7.31, which refers to this management plan to which you have referenced as part of the legal agreement, which outlines that the existing use of the site has been entered into the calculator as mixed type land. Excuse me, I'll start again. The existing use of the site has been entered into the calculator as a mixed land type in view of the mix of the uses it covers. 1.4 hectares of land already in use as a campsite, plus additional land which has an approved and implemented planning permission for an activity centre, plus some agricultural land, totalling 3.10 hectares of land. Following discussions with Natural England, it has however been identified that the additional area of land included within the application site, which falls outside the area of the approved campsite, would best be identified as lowland grassland for the purposes of the nitrate budget. Whilst the nitrate budget has not been updated to include low land grazing as the land use type due to the clear evidence proposed tourism pods will result in a reduction in occupancy capacity in comparison to the existing campsite use, it is satisfied that the proposal would result in a reduction in nitrogen load produced by the tourist activity. So what we're looking at is not only the pods, but the land use management plan brings land out of agricultural use, and that in itself adds to the reduction in nitrates going into the system.
Thank you, Ms. Wilkinson. Does that? Yeah, thank you. Councillor Quirk and then Councillor Spink.
Councillor Jones-Evans proposed a motion that I don't think it was seconded, and I would like to second it.
Sorry, that was a motion to continue, I assume. Yes. Well, I mean, I'm not entirely clear that we need a motion. My view is that we'll proceed forwards. But as it has been proposed and seconded, let us put it to the vote. So
may I just have an opportunity to, before we go to the vote,
yes,
please, to address. I don't think, and with great respect to Ms. Wilkinson, that the area outside the development site, the other side of the red line, affects the calculation of these pods. Now, my understanding is, and it's not an understanding, it's the case, because it says so, that the nitrates have been worked out on an annual basis. Now, developments that result in an increase of overnight accommodation on an annual basis, or which might, result in an overnight increase of accommodation on an annual basis are deemed, as it were, to increase the nitrates in the Solent unless they drain to Sandown. Now, it is obvious that this development will increase the number of people who can stay overnight. It's not a rocket science or a complicated calculation. It's the tents can occupy 160 people for 153 days of the year. That's 24,000, nearly 24,500, 24,480. The pods can only occupy, can only be occupied by 128 people per night. And so that's where the error has come. It's jumped to the conclusion that that means less nitrates. But because the pods are for 12 months of the year, you have to multiply that number by 365, and that gives you 46,000. So there is an increase in overnight accommodation. Now, if there's an increase in overnight accommodation and there's no mitigation for the increased nitrates, planning committee under the NPPF must refuse the application, because the NPPF says we must be satisfied that there would be no increase in the nitrates in the Solent. And on this figure, there will be. Now, I'm not saying we should necessarily refuse the application tonight, because it's possible that I've overlooked something. I certainly hope that I haven't. I've tried to look at it extremely carefully, but I could not vote for something which in my view is wrong in principle. So I shall vote against this. But what I would like to suggest is that we defer, we have it properly looked at, and that Natural England looks at it. Natural England have not, as I understand it, I'll be correct if I'm wrong, produced these figures. These figures are produced by the applicant. They're agreed by the LPA, and Natural England's position is that if the LPA has carried out due diligence, Natural England can see no reason for not concurring. But these figures are wrong on the overnight occupancy. And I say that we should either, I think it would be wrong of us to refuse this application. Equally, I think it would be wrong of us to pass it, because we have to pass it on all the information. And the information, as far as I can see, is wrong on a crucial matter of nitrate neutrality. If I get it wrong, or I've got it wrong, and it comes back that I'm wrong, then I shall apologise. But I don't think I am. And I think I would ask committee, therefore, either for Councillor Jones Evidence to withdraw her motion, or to vote against that motion and vote in favour of an adjournment or a deferment.
Thank you, Councillor Spink. So essentially, we have two proposals which go very much to the same issue, which is whether we defer or whether we proceed. For the sake of clarity, Councillor Jones Evans, do you wish to amend the phrasing of it, or do you? It's on the floor of the motion, so technically we should proceed unless you're happy to.
I haven't heard anything that would change the wording of my motion.
Councillor Brody.
Just a point of clarification, the status of Natural England on this application. I sometimes get a bit confused on this. I just Googled it, not looking up trousers or anything like that. Natural England is the statutory consultee for proposals that affect sites of special scientific interest and other protected sites. Is that correct? And if so, is this site applicable under that? Because I just wonder whether Natural England are a statutory consultee on this application.
Yeah, so I think the actual wording is that they are the government scientific advisor for the natural environment in England. And yes, they would have looked at the proposals. They're a statutory consultee. For anything that engages the habitat regs, we have to, by law, consult with them. They also, by law, have to sign off the habitat regulations assessment that we undertake, the appropriate assessment. We have to have their ratification. So obviously the applicants provided the figures. They then go to Natural England. Natural England check the figures. It's their calculator. They're the people who check them.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to be certain that we could rely on their figures. They actually had a statutory rule for this site. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brodie. Thank you, Mr. Chick. So we have a motion to continue, and the corollary of that, of course, is that if we don't continue, we would put forward the motion to defer subject to a seconder to Councillor Spink's proposal. So on Councillor Jones-Evans's proposal to continue with debate and question regarding this application, all those in favour with continuing with this debate?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
And against?
1, 2.
Abstentions? Thank you. So we will proceed. Councillor Spink, did you wish to propose your motion formally in view of this, or how would you like to proceed?
Don't see there's very much point in doing that unless there's some technical reason why I should.
No, not to my mind. I just did it for the sake of clarity and wanting to give everyone an opportunity to speak. Then we will proceed. So any questions on this application to continue? Councillor Churchman, no?
But I have a question on the content.
Please, yes.
Fine. Right, I'm very concerned what I call a tug at the heartstrings, because these pods are being suggested for Camp Liberties. My immediate reaction is, how do you block off the time that Camp Liberties will want these places? Is that going to be part of the format? Because this, I assume, will be quite cheap accommodation. And the last thing we will want to see, or I would want to see, is people booking these pods, and then the people they are being specifically designed for then can't book them. And if they're being booked on the basis for these children, I don't see why they have to be open 52 weeks of the year, because do these children book holidays over the Christmas period? As I said, I'm very concerned about the whole, how the booking system is going to be managed so that the Camp Liberty will still be able to book and not get a reply saying, terribly sorry, we're already full. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Churchman. Mr. Chick.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I think that the important thing to look at is the actual policy basis for the planning application, which is this an acceptable land use in this location? So you need to turn your minds to what the local plan says, the island plan, and what policy SP4, which is the tourism policy, what that talks about, which is high quality tourism accommodation, and the policy specifically says all year round tourism development will be supported. I think it would be a step too far for the planning authority to say only these people should book at this time, because we don't know at this time when they want to book, or even if they'll exist in 2 years' time. What you're looking at is a tourism development in front of you. Is it acceptable or not? And I suppose the things you need to balance that with is, you know, the sustainability of the site, landscape impacts, and all those other things outlined in the report. The chamber then can come to a balanced decision of, you know, put these issues on the scales, which one comes out positive or negative, and that's the way to look at it.
Thank you, Mr. Chick. Supplemental.
I'm still very concerned that these children will in fact be not priced out, but it will be cheap accommodation. And I'm really, really concerned that they will not end up benefiting from this planning application, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Churchman. Are there any questions before we move to the debate part of this application? Councillor Spink.
Just on the, if I may please, Chair, excuse me, on the conditions of external lighting and also lighting within the pods, is that condition capable of enforcement? Because reason I ask that is this, is that there was in the past both Mr. Chick and Mr. Bolter are aware of this. There was in the past on this site concern that the pods that had now been moved, the 5 pods, to another part of the site, were not complying with their lighting requirements. And when I inquired about it, I was told, I don't know if you remember, Mr. Bolter, but it's an email dated the 9th of December. You said this: any lighting not included with any approved application would not require planning permission. There's no ability to change or remove lights, nor not controlled through the permissions, So I'm just slightly confused that if that was the case with regard to the lighting, would it be, if Tapnor were to scrap the lighting or impose additional lighting, according to your email, my understanding is that would not be a breach of planning permission. So perhaps you could help with that, please.
Certainly, thank you, Chair. And that email sounds very sensible, so I would hope that it might have come from me, despite I'm sure not being under cross-examination, but I will put my name to that email. I think the key point here is what we've set out, or what is in front of members, is a planning application that requires consent. There is a condition associated with this lighting, with the lighting issue, that would be part of consent if committee were minded to approve the application. If the application is approved and the condition is part of that approval, it would be enforceable against. If they are not complying to the condition, then it would be a breach of the planning permission, and therefore we could take enforcement action if it was deemed expedient to do so. Thank you.
Just a supplementary. I'm therefore confused, I have to say, by your email, because the tenor of the email was, as I understood it, that if, for example, they put in additional lighting, the additional lighting would not be in breach of any planning consent.
That would depend on what conditions were associated with that original consent and whether there was a lighting plan, for example, associated with that. There will be things that applicants can do outside of PD. So there may be things such as, for example, maybe some of those barn buildings that might still be used for agricultural purposes that wouldn't have required planning permission. So as such, changes could be made under permitted development rights that way. It is very difficult to necessarily compare all applications and all situations when put under the spotlight, I suppose, ironically enough. But I am satisfied that in terms of the application in front of members and in terms of hopefully putting members' minds at rest, that there would be a sufficient level of control in terms of the lighting, should permission be granted, that the condition would do that. It is also within the gift of the committee to, if they felt it necessary, perhaps to strengthen that condition or to add in additional conditions to address the issue further if they felt it was necessary, and then those conditions met the national tests.
Thank you, Mr. Bolter. Councillor Jones-Evans.
I had some comment. If we move questions, is that okay, Chair?
Certainly, please.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm familiar with the site, and I don't know if anyone was back here. Maybe Councillor Fuller might remember back in 2010 we had an extensive visit all along the downs there above Afton when we had the I think it was the application for wind turbines, and I think it's almost a whole day out traipsing along the downs there. So I'm very familiar with the views from there and the site. Having said that, AONB in this case are supportive of the application as long as the conditions are met. So that to me is a big tick in the box. I think, moving to a 365 tourism offer is absolutely essential for our economy and for the island, for our workforce, and because it's beautiful every day of the year, isn't it? So I think I do welcome this application, and particularly the sensitivity of it, the way every sort of single aspect of this development has the environment in mind, and where it is, the typography of the land and how it's seen from different viewpoints, and of course the end use as well. And thank you, Mr. Chick, for answering my questions on email yesterday. I had some further questions regarding the pods themselves. I understand they're bespoke, made for the site, and they're super insulated. So that was my sort of question, was about heating during the winter time, but it's a kind of a posh wooden tent, I guess. And if you want to go and stay there, then a few extra blankets will do you, I guess. So, so I have read the report thoroughly, had some questions answered. I do thank Councillor Spink as well for his description of the place, all that goes on there, because it's a bit like Sandown Pier, sounds like a whole day's fun in one to me. So I do appreciate. I hadn't quite realised how much they actually offer as a tourism offer, which is absolutely essential for our growing economy, sustainably growing economy. So given that, given I've listened to everybody, obviously read the report, seen the presentation, I would like to propose that we approve this application with the, well, I can put it forward if I want to, can't I? People can still debate. No, people can still debate. I can do it, Vanessa. It's fine, isn't it? Because we only get one chance to speak, so I'm going to speak now, if that's okay. Is that okay? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yes, so I'd like to propose this goes forward for approval with the said conditional permissions, and also the caveat regarding the nitrates issue as well. So thank you. That's all.
Thank you, Councillor Jones-Evans. I appreciate that you've made a motion. I'm just going to bring in Mr. Bolter and then Councillor Price, Councillor Quirk, if that's acceptable to you. Then we will propose the seconder, if there is one. Thank you, Councillor Jones-Evans. Mr. Bolter.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Jones-Evans. Just to just be accurate, and apologies for perhaps appearing pedantic, but sometimes we do have to do that. And it is just to be clear, as per the report, paragraph 6.4, it is not accurate, I think, to say that the OMB have given support to the application. What they've said is that they have no objection. So apologies. They certainly in the planning sense, they are slightly different. Thank you.
They're such an august body, and it's such a sensitive area, they would have a lot to say about it. That's why I inferred from them not having a lot to say about it, that was inferring to me, in my mind, it was a support.
Thank you, Councillor Jones-Evans. Councillor Price.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm a bit concerned. This sort of comes across as that, it doesn't look like we like tourism over here. I think, someone said just now, is this an acceptable land use in this location? Absolutely. I'd hazard a guess I might have been conceived at a festival nearly 52 years ago. That site is, okay, maybe not that side of the road so much, but that site has been a host to quite a few things over the year. And I think the use that it has now is not only successful, it's a huge draw for tourism. It's a major part of the Isle of Wight's current offer. And I'd love to see more. I think we should all support seeing more of this cropping up around the island. We need these kind of attractions around the island. They are developing there clearly is going into lots of different diverse areas. Why would it matter if it's all year round? We've got seasonal workers on 0 hours contracts that would be, dribbling at the mouth to have more hours in other times of the year when virtually the Isle of Wight shuts. Some of these other high-end restaurants and things that have to shut for a time of the year would open longer if there's people here. Why would we only want to limit it to children? We want it to operate all year, surely. It's got to be a good thing. Why we would ever want to see a tourist site not open 52 weeks a year now would make no sense at all. I refer to the comment that my colleague from IWOG mentioned about disability access, which I think is a really good point. However, you know, we could possibly look at some kind of disability access on this site. If you have disability access around the whole site, of course, you'd be looking at hard areas and hard surfaces possibly, which would potentially make the site much less environmentally welcoming. So, you know, while I think we should definitely consider that, we could possibly bring something in for some of the site to have full disabled access, because that is a really important aspect. I don't know that we would be pricing anyone out of this accommodation. I mean, it's likely not to be cheap accommodation anyway, because it's probably the most beautiful part of the island, let's say. You know, people potentially would pay good money to stay there. But, you know, for this attraction to continue to evolve, as all of them around the island need to evolve, previously we never got quite as far as the offer that was coming up at Robin Hill, for instance. But, you know, how that would expand their offer and bring people to that area of the island is hugely important. And other than the potential discrepancy over nitrate neutrality, which I actually think probably isn't at all, I would very much assume that Natural England have made the right calculation, but that obviously can be verified and kept for the finalisation of the legal agreement. I just can see no negatives to this proposal. I think we should be supporting tourism, and certainly all year round. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Price. Councillor Jones-Evans, you had a motion that you proposed. Given that Councillor Price seems in favour of the application, I don't know whether you wish to rephrase the motion that you proposed to take account of the conditions that potentially Councillor Price referred to, or whether you wish to proceed as suggested.
Thank you, Chair. From what Mr. Bolt said earlier, I wasn't sure that we were able to condition any other accessibility onto this plan. I'll wait for some advice, but I think it's, you know, obviously conditions have to be reasonable, don't they, and be able to be done. So I'm just got concern over that. I mean, I agree completely that it's absolutely essential that we have more accessible tourism. In fact, you know, we've got several big players on the Isle of Wight that you know are doing a lot of work on that, especially Hover Travel, for instance. They're fantastic in that. So, but you know, we can only go what's on the paper in the papers here, and just listen to what Mr. Fogg said earlier. So I welcome any final comment on that.
Thank you, Councillor Jones-Evans. Mr. Chick.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, the comment I made earlier about disability is that, don't worry about it, it's fine, is that I think there'd be a struggle to refuse a planning application on that issue, but it certainly would be suitable to condition accessibility measures. And so if the Chamber considers that that's something that should be included as potential mitigation, then certainly officers can word a condition after committee or during committee to cover those measures. We certainly put them on in other sites, so it wouldn't be unprecedented.
Yeah, I'd be happy for a condition that I guess that at least, you know, some of the pods would be accessibility friendly. Yeah, one or two of them percentage.
Thank you, Councillor Jones-Evans. I will bring in quickly Councillor Quirk, as he's had his hand patiently waiting, and then Councillor Price. Thank you, Councillor Quirk.
For the last best part of 20 years, the Tourism Board, in whatever iteration it's been over the years, has wanted to increase the season and make it a year-round destination. This goes very well in actually delivering aspects of a year-round destination. So in terms of tourism offer of the island, this is really important. Councillor Jones-Evans made a proposal, but I don't think it was seconded, and I would like to formally second the proposal.
Splendid. It's been formally seconded, in which case we will move to, apologies, one moment. Splendid, thank you. So I'm going to just bring in Mr. Bolter to clarify the form in which this may take. Actually, before I do so, Councillor Andre, you did have your hand up, so I will bring you in, and I will bring in Councillor Price. It just gives us a little more chance in terms of the deferral. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I've listened very carefully to the debate so far, and I think we need to be really careful here because there seem to have been a couple of red herrings, so which I feel are possibly outside the remit of planning committee. I mean, I would have, as this is predominantly aimed at a partnership between Tampnell Farm and Camp Libertas, I would potentially have safeguarding issues as to the rest of the site, but that's not something, that's something for the applicant in Camp Libertas, not something for this committee, I think, to consider. So I think we do need to be really careful when considering this, that we are considering things that are within our remit and therefore putting the conditions on. I would hope that any, and this I think maybe slightly more clarity, I would hope that any development of this type would have to comply with the Equality Act 2010 and where that falls. I would be really disappointed if in considering this application as a planning committee, we had to make that as a condition. So some clarity on that I think would be helpful, but listening overall, I agree wholeheartedly that we do need to support our tourism offer. And even in my time, I think the season becomes shorter and shorter. So I think we really must applaud something that does actually want to offer year round. But again, it's not for us to dictate the usage of that. I mean, I think it's great that there is this potential partnership, but it's not an exclusive partnership as I understand it with Camp Libertas. But that year-round accommodation, I've read the comments as well. There are mixed comments, all very valid, those points against, those points for, but I think on balance, and that's what we have to look at here, I am minded to approve of this, but I would just like clarification over whether we should have to make it a condition for accessibility.
Thank you, Ms. Wilkinson.
Thank you. I think, sorry, I distracted Russ, I think, or Mr. Chick, I should say, when you were asking your question. So my apologies. So I will answer because I heard the question. In that, yes, you are correct. And the Act stands alone, as Mr. Chick said earlier. We don't override each other. So yes, they would still have to comply with the Equality Act. Absolutely. That's taken as read effectively. The difference is if this was a dwelling, generally you would see in a response from officers that it would be covered by building regulations because Part M of the building regulations ties into that act. The challenge we have is that I am unclear whether these would require building regulations because of the nature of the structures. So we don't get that kind of second catch, as if you will. So should members wish to have a condition, we can recommend wording on one that would allow some comfort potentially on that matter.
May I have a supplementary?
You may.
Chair? My only concern with that, and for consideration, is that if we apply such a condition, would that then make the proposal, as far as the applicant is concerned, unviable?
Mr. Bolton.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Andre. I think this comes to a crux and a thought process that we have to go through on a daily, if not hourly basis as officers. And the way that I refer to it within the team is in fact, it's a two-limb test. And the first test is, can I do something? The second test is, should I do something? And I think those are different questions. I think the advice that has been given this evening certainly answers the first limb, which is, could the committee put such a condition on if it was so minded? The answer is yes. The answer to the second question, should the committee do that, is a little more difficult, certainly for me to answer, because our role here is to advise the committee to arrive at that decision. So I'm afraid I'm going to have to push that part of the test back to committee members for your own consideration and deliberation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Bolter. I'm minded that Councillor Stewart has also patiently had his hand up, but there is a proposal before us, so I'm going to take his question. I'm then going to suggest that we defer, sorry, not defer, but we adjourn, I should say. That will give members the opportunity potentially to speak amongst to officers, I should say, regarding any conditioning. Yes. Yeah. So I've been advised we're going to go to Councillor Stewart first, and then I'll address that issue. Thank you.
Thank you. I thought you'd miss me out entirely, which actually is probably not a bad idea sometimes. Coming back to the can and should, it's actually quite important that we can consider this carefully, and we should consider this carefully. And it is a balanced judgment, as all of these things are, and we always fall one way or the other. Coming back to Councillor Spink's statement about nitrates, I actually think he has quite a valid point. I do have some background as a science teacher, so I do know what nitrates are, and just about do the maths. I think I passed my stats, but I've probably forgotten most of them anyway. I think disabled access is fairly critical to an offer which is supposed to be for a large range of children, and therefore should be inclusive. But of course, Councillor Jones-Evans is entirely right. As Councillor Price has said so clearly, we are looking for a 52-week tourist destination approach, and I think that that is to be applauded. And certainly from Job's point of view, my son left the island because he couldn't get a winter job. I think that applies to a number of other people as well. However, I'm afraid that what I haven't addressed and what hasn't really been addressed and has been previously mentioned is the AONB reference. They haven't objected to it. I consider that, having been driving and walking around the West White and this area for 25 plus years now, it's a lot longer than that, I was trying to work it out. I consider that this application certainly impinges quite a lot on the landscape. And as far as I am concerned, I cannot see that this particular site is appropriate for development because of the landscape aspect. That was it.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. I'm going to bring in Mr. Guard now to speak to the proposal that Councillor Jones-Evans has made, that Councillor Price has seconded. I beg your pardon, Councillor Quirk has seconded. Mr. Guard.
Thank you, Chairman. There is a proposal on the floor to approve in accordance with officer recommendation proposed by Councillor Jones-Evans, seconded by Councillor Quirk. I just come in at this point to seek clarity on whether it is you wanted to have the wording on a suggested condition for the disability access point to be included in your proposal, Councillor Jones-Evans, or whether you don't want to hear that. I'm mindful that colleagues do have that ready for you if you want to hear it, as to whether it can be included or not.
Thank you, Mr. Guard. Ms. Wilkinson, are you able to assist?
Thank you, Chair. So potential wording, should councillors wish to incorporate a condition, could run along the lines of, it's not going to be word perfect, but along the lines of, prior to any of the pods hereby approved being brought onto the site, details of accessibility measures to ensure that an appropriate proportion of the pods would be usable by those who may be registered disabled shall be submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority to accord with policy DM2.
Thank you. And if Councillor Jones-Evans wishes to include that in her proposal, I then look to Councillor Quirk to see if he's happy to act as a second. That's the amended motion. Chairman, I'm conscious you do have some hands here, so I will leave it back to you.
Thank you. Given the desire of everyone to participate, and I think notwithstanding the constitution of which I am mindful, I am going to continue with the dialogue. So Councillor Churchman, then Ms. Cox, and then Councillor Brodie. Councillor Churchman, please.
Yes. Sorry, Councillor Andre. I disagree with you about the children. The details of application clearly states in 3.4 that it is to do with 8 to 15-year-olds activities, holidays. So I'm sorry, somewhere, as far as I'm concerned, there should be a condition in there that they take precedence. Whether they block off weeks or not, I don't know, but you can't submit an application and then say, oh, well, that particular paragraph doesn't matter. I personally, I think Tapnell's Farm is absolutely brilliant. I've been there many times, not many, but a few times, and I think what they have done is really excellent, and it is what we need. However, I think these pods are the ugliest thing I've seen for a long time. I really think they do nothing for the rest of the farm itself. Why can't they build little hobbit homes, which would be such an attraction? You can laugh, Councillor Price, but you think about it. What an attraction that would be. But these little square boxes, I agree with Councillor Sturt, I find that very difficult to cope with. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Churchman. Ms. Cox, I will representative. Thank you.
Okay, regarding the disability access, which obviously I'm very keen on, my eldest son has cerebral palsy, so most of my adult life has taken these matters in. But my real concern, other than the fact that he wouldn't be able to access the pods or actually get into the ablution block, is that the only toilet for the disabled within that block is in the adults' shower room, but there is no showering facilities that's adapted for that disabled person. So whilst they may be able to go to the toilet and get into it, they won't actually be able to clean the rest of themselves.
Councillor Brodie.
Thank you, Chair. Unusually for us, we haven't got any issue about housing here so much, have we? On the side visit, Councillor Spink said, no doubt you'll be wanting 35% affordable homes here, but you know, obviously, you know, appropriate socially rented housing is my keenest interest. But tied in with that is employment, jobs all year round. I have to say to you, you know, knowing something of the history of the Isle of Wight, I think back in the 50s, opportunities were lost on the island to have real jobs on the island, because I'm not a fan of tourism. I think tourism is largely seasonal, very low paid, casualised, insecure. And would have always preferred to see what I call real jobs, which in the 50s, some of you will know, there was a possibility of a nuclear power plant at Newtown Creek. Just imagine that, Peter, that's still in your ward. That would have created a lot of proper jobs on the Isle of Wight, in my view. But setting that aside, tourism is what we have on the island. It's a major employer on the Isle of Wight, and we need to have 52 weeks of the year employment for people. So not only is it a roof over their head, it's about having somewhere to live. Now, like I've lived on the island nearly 35 years now. I've walked most of it regularly. I've cycled most of the rest of it, most of it. I use Broad Lane on a very regular basis. And I must admit, I was astonished the way development happened there long before I ever joined the planning committee, particularly those pods, I think they are, that are just off Broad Lane, because I do think they're quite intrusive into the area. But they're there. Decisions were made in the past, well before I joined this committee, to allow the Tapnell farm to develop in the way it has. I think that argument was lost a long time ago. This is, from the sound of it, frankly, I've never visited it. I've got no need to go there. I have no young children. There's no, one day I will call in and see what it's all about. But it is apparently a quality tourist experience. It creates jobs. And if it's creating jobs, that's got to be good for me. I think I will say, I was quite interested in Councillor Spring's arguments about nutrient nitrate levels, etc., because I think it follows his train of thought on that. And I think you were right, Peter. And I say that somebody's got an A level in maths, though my arithmetic in my head isn't as good as it once was, I have to say. But I was quite interested in what you were saying. It might be interesting to see how that pans out with the land management plan, etc. But I will support this application. I think, given what's already at Tapnell Farm, I see no reason to do something. I do have a bit of sympathy with Councillor Churchman, because I think they are blooming ugly, and I think something could be much better. And I used to have a motorhome and go to campsites, etc., around the country. And quite often you see what you call hobbit homes, and they're much more attractive. These just look like allotment sheds in the northeast, you know, which I visit on a regular basis. They're not great. I wouldn't fancy staying in them, but if the people want to go there, good for them. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Brodie. Councillor Spink and Councillor Critchison. Councillor Spink.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and be brief because I've taken up quite a lot of time tonight of the committee's time. But I just wonder if I could ask a question, or at least make a point about two of the conditions. The landscaping is extremely important. If I've understood it correctly, the reason that the AONB does not object is because of the landscaping that is proposed. Now, it's going to take, in the statement, it's generally agreed that it would take 15 years for the landscaping to establish itself. Now, condition number 4 says that any trees or plants which within a period of 5 years from the completion of the development die, removed or become damaged or diseased shall be replaced in the next planting season. Does it have to be limited to 5 years? Shouldn't there be either a condition, by way of condition, or in the 106 agreement, an ongoing maintenance plan so that the landscaping remains as is, or as will be, and as is specified in the papers? Otherwise, trees, it's not uncommon for plants and trees to die within the first 5, 6, 7 years. And there'd be no obligation, as I understand it, to do anything about it. So there should be a continuing plan, in my management plan, in my view, or a change to that condition. It's highly unlikely that this accommodation would be used as full-time accommodation, but as they say, you never know. And condition number 7 is the register that is kept of people and names and addresses. Must it only be limited to 10 years, people who are staying there and their names and accommodation? Or could that be throughout? It's not exactly a huge task to keep a register, and it would help to keep a check that it doesn't turn into one of these, which I think is highly unlikely, one of these, as it were, housing estates by stealth, which we have had or do have in development on the island. So I'd ask, please, if those 2 points could either be incorporated by amending the conditions or in the 106 agreement. And I'd give way to Mr. Chick's advice on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Spink. Mr. Chick, are you able to assist?
Yes, thank you. I mean, the 5-year landscaping requirement, so the 5-year replacement, is pretty standard condition that planning authorities use, but it's not a fixed period. So if the chamber considered that actually that 5 years should be greater, then it can do, and include it in the motion. In terms of the 10-year rolling register, the requirement for that is due to time it takes for a breach to become immune. So a breach of a planning condition can become immune after 10 years. And so the reason for that rolling 10 years to be there is because at any point the planning authority goes back to the developer, the landowner, and says, we need to see you register, there should always, at that period, be 10 years backwards in the past, showing how that has been used. So that's why it's that 10-year, and it's all about reasonableness of saying to someone, actually, you should keep a register that's longer than that, because what's the need for it? And then does it start to tip against what GPDR says about information that local authorities should keep when it's necessary to keep them? So I think my advice to committee would be 10 years is right for that, but 5 years in terms of the landscaping would be something that can be debated.
It might be easier, could that be included in a section 106 agreement that the, this is the trees, the, condition 4, that the landscape be maintained and kept in perpetuity in accordance with the planning consent? Could we not have that as part of a section 106 agreement?
Thank you, Councillor Spink. Yes, I mean, it could be. There is an existing requirement for a 106 agreement, and it is related to land management. So there's this land management plan. The scope of that requirement could be extended to land management, but also landscape management, and therefore replacing any trees that died over a period if necessary. So yes, that the scope of that 106 could be extended if committee felt it was appropriate.
Thank you, Mr. Chick. I'm going to go to Councillor Critchison, which will give officers the chance to potentially ventilate the issue that you have raised, Councillor Spink, as to whether you would wish to, in conjunction with Councillor Jones-Evans, potentially amend that or append that to the proposal. Councillor Critchison, thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to put my opinions across about the disability as well and say I support that because I think it's a very important area that we do have accommodation that facilitates what their needs in all areas, because then we can make sure they get the experiences that others get as well. So if that's included, I'm happy. Also, anything that increases the bus usage, I see that Southern Vectors have supported it, and anything that could extend that season of bus usage and public transport, I think is worth supporting. But I would like to make sure that, as Councillor Spink was saying, because Councillor Stewart and I have had issues about lawful development certificates on campsites that have had other things on it in years later, and saying that there's a precedent for it. So again, as Councillor Spink said, I would want to make sure that that is covered, that we're not going to find a whole lot of mobile homes on there or something in years to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Critchison. Officers, do you need a few moments to confer, or we can certainly go to adjourn? I'm conscious that we've been speaking here for 2 hours, and potentially a comfort break might be helpful. No, I'm seeing nods, and no, we'll proceed. Mr. Poulter. Okay, Mr. Chick.
So yeah, in terms of legal agreement and landscaping, it's unreasonable to have a condition and a legal agreement together. So I think what you would do is keep the part of the condition that says you shall undertake the landscaping on this site in accordance with the plans we already have. And I'd also advise that the actual timing for when that initially took place should stay in a condition. But then the ongoing management would then go into the legal agreement, because what Councillor Spink is asking for, as I see it, is something in perpetuity, which can't be in a condition, because a condition can always be breached after 10 years. It doesn't matter if you put in there, you should do this in perpetuity. If it's breached for 10 years, that's the end of it, it's breached. Good night, Vienna. But in terms of the legal agreement, that does not become immune. So that would therefore be the right place for the clause to be.
Thank you, Mr. Chick. Councillor Price.
Sorry, just on the landscaping, am I right in saying that if there's a landscape condition, that is in perpetuity anyway, isn't it? Because the landscape has to be maintained to that standard unless something is changed, and it's then down to enforcement and so on to look after that. Am I correct in saying that?
Yes, so effectively, landscaping plan is undertaken, the landscaping is put in place. That landscaping should be retained thereafter. That's what the condition says. The issue relates to this, replacement of any trees that die. It is very unusual. I will say that it's very unusual to have, this kind of clause put into a legal agreement saying any tree that dies in 100 years shall be replaced. It is very unusual, and I think the committee has to balance up whether that's reasonable given the landscape impacts of the site. Is it critical to have something longer than normal? But that's for the committee to debate.
Thank you, Mr. Chick. Do the committee have any views regarding landscaping or the issues that have been ventilated with regards to conditions? If not, I think we will proceed with Councillor Jones-Evans' proposal, which has been seconded by Councillor Spink, subject to the condition, Quirk, I beg your pardon, Quirk, subject to the wording that Ms. Wilkinson has articulated. I assume we're happy to proceed. So on that basis, excuse me, one moment. So we will go straight to the vote as proposed by Councillor Jones-Evans with the conditioning that has been ventilated by Ms. Wilkinson. So all those in favour?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
And against?
1, 2.
Abstentions? Thank you. Carried. Splendid. Well, we will proceed then with agenda item 6, reminding anyone who may be watching that the previous agenda has been amended to withdraw the application in relation to Bembridge. So agenda item 6 then is the decision review, monitoring and appeals performance report, which will be given by Mr. Bolter. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. In the spirit of keeping my involvement in this brief, I suppose, I would highlight a couple of points. Firstly, to members that this is a report for noting, and the second really is simply, as I'm sure everyone will have read the report already, is to simply highlight the evaluation section, which is in page 106 and 107 of your pack, and particularly paragraph 52, which is the signing off paragraph, which is that it is considered that in light of these statistics, there should be a great level of confidence in the quality of decision making of the local planning authority. And that comes from someone who, as I said earlier, failed a statistics examination. But I can assure you, councillors, you should have great confidence in the work of the LPA when it comes to its performance as measured by government in relation to the quality of its decisions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Bolter. Any questions or comments from committee? Councillor Brodie.
Well, as I said earlier, I've got A-level maths, but it's pure maths with statistics. So I understand statistics, Rolly, so maybe I'll give you a hand sometime. But I mean, I think the report is excellent. It entirely reassures me regarding the quality of decision making. I know that may not always be the view of some members of the council, but I think this underlines that we are doing pretty well here. And overall, I have absolute confidence in it. I formally propose that we note the report and thank the planning officers for it. Thank you.
Thank you. So proposed and seconded, all in favour? Against? Yeah. Well, I think that's carried. Splendid. Thank you very much, Mr. Bolton. And I think, as Councillor Brodie has very eloquently stated, that we should have full confidence in what the LPA is doing, and it's great to see some of those statistics. We'll move on then to agenda item 7, which is members' question time. Are there any questions? No? Splendid. Well, in that case, I draw today's meeting to close, and thank you for your attendance. Thank you to the public. Thank you.